Hello and welcome to the AI for Good webinar series. My name is Preetham Malur from the ITU, the International Telecommunication Union, and I have the privilege of introducing you to today's webinar. ITU is the United Nations Specialized Agency for ICTs, and we are also the organizers of AI for Good, along with XPRIZE, in partnership with 38 UN agencies and co-convened with Switzerland. So the goal of this summit is to identify practical applications of AI to advance the Sustainable Development Goals and to scale up those solutions for global impact. We are pleased today to discuss developing girls' digital and AI skills for more inclusive AI for all. This session is organized in support of the Generation Equality Forum, a process convened by UN Women and co-hosted by the governments of Mexico and France. In 2020, ITU became one of the co-leads together with UNICEF, Finland, Women at the Table, and other players of the Generation Equality Technology and Innovation Action Coalition. As you know, the ICT sector has a serious problem, lack of gender inclusion and equity for girls. While AI-powered technologies hold enormous potential to improve the lives of children, as UNICEF's policy guidelines on AI for children illustrates, this can only be achieved if action is taken to address current imbalances in the AI ecosystem, including gender bias and discrimination. So evidence indicates that if girls are not involved in the design of AI systems in a meaningful way, systemic gender biases will continue to be perpetuated. For example, by 2022, it's estimated that 85% of AI projects will deliver erroneous outcomes due to bias. Special attention needs to be given to ensure that girls are included in AI literacy programs, given their underrepresentation in digital literacy programs generally. AI-enabled solutions, feminist AI, should be developed by and for girls and young women so that their needs are met in an empowering and safe way, and gender bias is minimized. So dear colleagues, today we have a distinguished set of panelists. But as always, we are counting on you, the participants, to help create an engaging discussion. For this, we'll be using the Q&A functionality, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. There's also the chat functionality. Please make sure to set the message recipient to all panelists and attendees, and not just to all panelists. You can select this just above the message box. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Aki Enkenberg, Senior Advisor at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland, who will introduce the session. Over to you, Aki. Thank you.
Many thanks, Preetham, and it's a real pleasure to be here. So, dear friends of AI and gender equality, on behalf of the government of Finland, it is really my pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar on girls and artificial intelligence. AI is a topic of real importance for Finland. We were one of the first countries in 2017 globally to devise a national AI strategy. This has led to new investments in AI skills and talent, research, innovation, and increased application of machine learning and AI across various sectors. Finland also promotes international and global cooperation on AI. As part of the European Union, we're committed to advancing a world where AI systems are developed and used responsibly with transparency, accountability, and respect for human rights. Gender equality, the topic of today's discussion, is another deep-rooted priority for Finland. So even though we regard ourselves as a very gender equal society, when it comes to technology, actually, the situation is not always so rosy. This is a field still dominated by men, also in our country, despite our knowledge that diversity is also good for business. The more diverse companies are, the more profitable they usually are. Now, AI can open us a whole new world of opportunities and become a positive force for sustainable development. But it can also deepen digital divides, including the gender divide. So what should we do to steer AI into a direction we want? First, I think we need to address the role of girls and women as creators of AI and as AI professionals or future professionals. Unfortunately, there are no silver bullets or quick fixes for promoting gender equality in the tech sector. But we do know that change is most effective when it starts from early childhood. So we must look at the whole system from pre-primary education onwards and see what attitudes and practices really affect girls opportunities to excel in STEM disciplines later on. We must also make sure that our policies, institutions, and programs really support girls and women in their path to becoming researchers, technology professionals, entrepreneurs, or leaders in this field. And let's not forget the importance of having more girls and women as role models. And secondly, we also need to focus on the technology itself. So we know that algorithms affect children's daily life and shape their worldview by informing their choices or increasingly making choices also for them. So for ensuring children's rights are protected in the age of AI, we are very proud to have worked with UNICEF in developing the world's first policy guidance on AI for children, also mentioned by Preetam just now. To manage gender-specific risks possibly created by AI, we need to uncover and tackle possible biases embedded in these systems and make sure that AI-driven recommendations or decision-making processes do not adversely affect girls and women. I would also encourage focusing more of our efforts on applying AI for promoting gender equality. So AI for good. So this is where we come to the Generation Equality, this new 5-year global campaign for gender equality. Finland is one of the leaders of the Generation Equality Action Coalition on Technology and Innovation, and we have formulated some ambitious and game-changing targets. The number one aim of this coalition is really to bridge the gender gap in digital access and skills. This requires improving accessibility of digital services, advancing innovative financing for digital skills, and also addressing harmful stereotypes. In addition, action is required to improve access to financing for women tech entrepreneurs and increasing women's participation in the technology sector, also in leading roles. And finally, we really must eliminate online gender-based violence and harassment that can hold girls and women back and limit their participation as users or creators of technology for the future. We have just launched a national publicity campaign called Algorithm for Equality to highlight the need to act on these issues in Finland, but more importantly, to really ask stakeholders to commit through their own actions to this global campaign. Now, when it comes to hyped topics such as artificial intelligence, we sometimes feel that there is too much discussion happening. But I think the reality is we don't actually discuss enough, at least not with the right people we should be discussing with. So I believe today's panel will be all about having the right discussion at the right time with the right people involved. It really is time to talk about girls and AI. I hope that all of you will join us in making tech more equal. And I thank once again ITU and UNICEF for organizing the webinar. Thank you. And I'll pass it on to Patty.
Thanks a lot, Aki, and thanks, Pritam. I think you guys have really set the stage for what we hope to have in this next panel discussion of really engaging all of you who have joined us today as the many stakeholders who are the AI community. And what we hope in our panel is, and you've seen the amazing lineup of folks we have. We'll be speaking with Caitlin and Echem and Alicia and Hoda in a minute. And what's exciting is that is exactly what Aki was just talking about. We need to engage the full range of stakeholders to take action. And what we hope by the end of this panel discussion is really to have very concrete actions that we can commit to together. And we really need you to be engaged in this conversation today. And I highly encourage you to use the Q&A function to put your questions and comments as we're going along in this discussion. But before we get started with the panel discussion and have some of these inspiring women and young and girls be part of telling us what's the need to fill this diversity gap, we want to kickstart with a poll of 3 questions. So if you get prepared, we're going to kickstart the first question now. And with this first question, we want you to really think about the world of the AI community, the technologists, the folks who are actually the game changing at the table. And what's the face you immediately put on that? What is the percentage of AI professionals who are female right now? So if the poll is popped up, and we'll give you a couple of minutes to put in your answer. Is it 99% of all AI professionals are female? 75%? half, 50%, or 22%? Again, from what you know of the AI community, what percent of females currently what professionals are female? We'll wait for the answer. Wow, 22%. So this isn't, first of all, this is an amazingly knowledgeable audience, I can tell, because absolutely right. We're at 22% of the current professional workforce in AI are female. I want to take a moment and think about that. That's a little bit over 1 in 5, everyone. So let's pop up the next question and our poll. And again, we'll have a poll of 3 questions just to kind of get a sense of who's in the room. We already can understand that you really know a lot about this space from the answer of that first question. So our second question of our poll, and this gets to some of the pipeline of who are the AI professionals of tomorrow. And 35% of men who are studying science, tech, engineering, and math. So over 1 in 3 of men who are studying these subjects at university will go on to pursue a career in STEM. What percent of the female STEM graduates do you think pursue a STEM career? Do you think it's equal? So 35% of who's at the university classroom, men and women, they both pursue a STEM career? Is it 25%? Is it 18%? Or is it 10%? So where are we in sort of the pipeline of who's studying these subjects to be AI professionals and translating that to being part of the workforce? So I'll give you a couple of minutes. 35%, 25%, 18%, 10%. And thanks, Sebastian. He'll be putting up the collective answer in just a minute. So again, are we as females equal to men in translating what we learn at university to jobs? Or are we less? We have a bit of a polling error. We're going to see what that means in just a second. But thanks for everybody for adding in your responses. So it was 10% if we're looking at the chat window. And that's a little bit less than it actually is, everybody. We are at about 18%. So we have 35% of men who are studying science and tech, and then 18% who are female, who translate that studying into work. And it looks like our poll is down, but the last question was really just, and I'll ask you guys to just think about this. The last question was really going to be, how hopeful are you about the future? How hopeful are you that the community of AI is becoming more diverse? So maybe we can just take the poll down and we'll get started on our panel discussion. So we're going to kickstart the panel discussion with Hoda. So Hoda, what would be great first is if you can maybe just give a few words of who you are. I mean, I can tell people who you are, but I always think it's more impactful when you kind of say who you are yourself and where you're coming from, why you joined this panel, and then we'll open it up to a question to kind of help with the framing of what we want to talk about today. So just a little bit about yourself, Hoda.
Sure, Patty, thank you so much, and thank you for the ITU for organizing such a great symposium. I would call it a symposium of impact and action. My name is Huda Al-Khazemi. I'm an assistant professor in Department of Engineering in NYU Abu Dhabi. I've worked in the STEM field for the past, I would say, 17 plus years. I have a PhD in cryptography and cryptanalysis. And I'm saying it because I want to motivate girls who are across the board to be part of the scientific troops who want to join such a field. It's a field that is a mix of mathematics, electrical engineering, computer engineering, and other types of science and engineering degrees. And I'm also the president of Emirates Digital Association for Women and the strategic director of Women in AI, which is a community, a non-for-profit community here in UAE, trying to create opportunities for women in STEM that has value. And not only women, because we as women, when we work with like an ecosystem, we tend to work with the whole community. We develop also opportunities for children. One of the programs that we worked with here with the General Women Council in UAE is an initiative called Digital Child. We are so proud of that because we try to bring in a curriculum, a strong curriculum of STEM and AI into schools, and it kicked off really prominently. So why am I here today? I'm here today because I would love to share a perspective on how we should build an unbiased AI and why is it important for us to collectively advocate for open R&D when it comes for AI and give that platform for the next generation, which is the youth who are going to be responsible of hopefully bringing a sense of equality into the table.
Thanks, Hoda. I mean, that's, I think it's so important to understand who you are in our Zoom screen right now. And thank you for really telling us your background, how you got to where you are, and then the different tables where you are and the impact you're making. And, I think if maybe you can just dig a little deeper to help all of us be on the same playing field. We've heard in the kind of opening remarks, there's a lack of diversity in the AI community. And can you just really unpack, like, as of today, what is the impact of that? Like, why is that important? Why is it not just about counting the number of men or women, but like, why is the lack of inclusion and diversity in this community not allowing this community to be the most impactful it can be as of today? And then maybe like you can give some thoughts of, well, how do you see this is more hopeful toward the future when you look at the pipeline of who's studying what and the intentional sort of equity gaps being addressed there as well? Just to sort of set the frame for us as we sort of have this discussion.
Sure, Patty. I'll try to my best to be on the positive side here. To tell you the truth, that if you looked at the landscape of AI, end of the day, is a field of science and technology that is functional in a very diverse and sporadic nature. It has a very sporadic nature of being in every field and every industry. So if you want to, and it is impacting these fields and industry because of the efficiencies that it is bringing to these fields. Now, if we want to make sure that a woman or any other group has a field opportunity, well, then we need to make sure that the inclusivity of these algorithmics that are embedded within the AI built for utilization within these industries are just and fair and well representative of the groups across board. We've seen in the past several incidents where AI has been utilized for example, recruitment purposes for a huge giant tech organization, and people who were the subjects of this recruitment AI tools reported incidents of discrimination against their portfolio because end of the day they were not white male in certain positions, so their CVs were overlooked by the AI because the designers behind these AIs also bring in their biases into the equation. As human beings, we have over 80 biases that we tend to maybe sometimes address and sometimes don't address when we communicate with people. Imagine as a developer and as a designer, you bring in that bias into the equation when you're building such a tool that is very sporadic and that's very diverse in terms of its influence around the globe. So what we are trying to do here is to make sure that we have that kind of conscious mapping when we are trying to de-bias the algorithmics. And I would say that some people, they do have these kind of efforts, and groups of scientists and researchers have these efforts where they are concerned about algorithmic hygienes. It's more than just algorithmic hygienes, to tell you the truth, Patty. It's also about the impact gap. If we don't address the gender inequality gap, we will not address the impact gap that an AI could bring into the table. An impact that today we're trying to address when we're saying that the world is about building a solution by its holistic population, not by only the 50% of the population that are connected on a digital space, but also by everybody within the represented population existing on that digital space. So to avoid having a catastrophic impact gap, and to avoid having this kind of ethical and bias-oriented gaps that will eventually impact a gender and equality gap, we need to fix the AI and make sure that people who are developing, or engineers and developers responsible about the background engine of developing this AI, are doing their due diligence to make sure that the build-up process is inclusive to everyone around the table. Mind you that AI as well is influencing at the moment the healthcare industry. Can you imagine what will happen if you are waived of that kind of analytics platform because of the way, because of your race or of your gender? And there has been certain incidents where people in the past as well been subjected when we have this kind of image detection system, they've been subjected to these heavily biased AI, where certain minorities were not being able to be detected for those level of technologies. So in order to live authentically digitally, we need to make sure that we bring in all of our efforts into the table. And we, and Women in AI and IDAO as well, we advocate for a technology that's not only built by women, but also being built by kids, and being built by teenagers, and being built by every age group and every group out there to represent them within the digital space.
Thanks, Hoda. I mean, and really appreciate the concrete, example of in the health industry. And I think, a couple of the points you raised, and we'll come back to those in the discussion with the other panelists. I think it's about, AI is just touching every industry. It is something that has an immediate and potential impactful sort of impact, results across everything. And I do think you've laid out a really nice example of how, without the diversity of the people at the table, which really includes sort of gender representation as one aspect of diversity, it's just one who, if you don't have that diversity, then the tools themselves won't be meeting the needs as complex as they could be. So I think what we'll do now is we'll turn to, and I think what Hoda also sort of outlined is that if we have a snapshot of we're in 2021 and we have X% of women at the table, X% of men, what does it look like, say, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And I think what we need to do is just take a moment and look at the youth generation. And I'm very thrilled to have Etchem and Alicia join. So maybe Etchem and Alicia, if you can just open up your video, and maybe Alicia will start with, apologies for my puppy in the background, everyone. It's the reality of my life. But Alicia, maybe we can start with you to do an introduction, and then Etchem.
Yes, of course. Well, hi, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm so excited to be speaking on a topic that's so close to my heart. A bit about me, I'm 14 and I just started high school this year. I'm from Toronto, and I'm really fascinated by just the potential and the power technology has to do good in the world and to solve some of the world's biggest problems. Specifically for me, that's around mental health. mental illness and mental health is such an important topic. Being a youth, especially in my generation, it's just so prevalent. And the whole intersection between AI and suicide prevention and mental health, that's a bit about the field that I've been working in. And I just think that there's so much power and potential of using technology to really solve some of the world's biggest problems, like mental health is. And so I'm just really honored to be here and also be here joining and speaking with Etchem, who's also so inspiring to me. But yes, so honored to be here.
And Etchem, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
Sure, I would love to. First of all, thank you all so much for having me here. Thank you, Alicia, for your kind words. I'm so excited to be speaking here with you and our many inspiring and amazing panelists. Well, I'm a diversity advocate from Turkey, a founding member at the World Economic Forum AI Youth Council, and the founder of Tech Ladies. I'm currently a high school senior, and I will be starting as a freshman at Stanford next fall.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to hear a little bit about, and Alicia, I'll start with you. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about this intersection of mental health and AI and how particularly you are engaged in that as sort of an inspiration of like, what does it mean to have you sort of, and who are you working with at this sort of intersection and how that diversity is actually equaling a better product, right? A better impact, as what Hoda was saying. And then we'll come to you, Etchem, to some of your experiences in Turkey as well.
Yeah, well, that sounds great. I'd like to start. I'll go in a bit more detail about the mental health and AI, but I'd like to start a bit about my journey. As someone who's pretty young, and when I was a bit younger, technology was something I was always fascinated by. It was something really fascinating to me, but I think I always felt sort of distant towards it. Like I couldn't really get my hands on it, and I knew that when I was in grade 8, there was a team of a robotics team that was, it was just led of all boys, but I really wanted to join, and really just because I wanted to learn. And for me, I joined the team, being the only girl there, being the captain, and it's not all a happy story because at the end of the day, when we won our competition, one of the boys actually came up to me and asked, Alicia, why do you even bother, coding and programming when all you're ever going to be is a housewife? And that to me was quite a difficult experience, and it also came as a shock to me because it really did make me question my potential and what I really could do in this world. And I think what I've really learned is that I think from that experience is that I had to challenge the status quo. And I think what I really want to emphasize on it really starts from when you're young. We can make the changes when you're about to go in industry, when we're about to go get a job, but when you're young, that's really where it all starts. It's really where these stigmas and societal norms really start to take play. And I think for me, it's been super important to, do the courageous. And I think as girls, we often have to fit in this mold of being perfect. There's a stat that says that guys who are 60% capable for a job will apply, but girls who are 90% capable, they will apply, because it really shows that girls really believe that they have to be perfect in order to fit in the job. And I think what it really is about being the courageous. And to speak more into the AI and mental health space, for me, I really knew that I wanted to get my hands on it. And
but
when
Alicia, I want to pick up on something you're saying, and for everyone in the discussion today, which we're hitting sort of triple numbers here. I think this is such an important point about why we're talking about girls in AI, because it is you're 14 years old, and you're saying when you were even younger, you were in a situation where you were challenged. You were challenged, and that impacted your confidence. That made you stop and think, and how impactful that is. And we'll get to you. You obviously exceeded that challenge, and you're doing amazing things. And we're going to talk about the mental health work in a minute. But I'm just curious, Etchem, can we take a step back and look at the sort of world, and because you're in Turkey, Alicia's in Canada, have you also had similar sort of, or you or your peers, right? I mean, because you're on this panel representing your peers, and have you also seen like why it's so important to like really specifically address, not wait until you're 21 or 25 looking for your job and then looking at some of those diversity metrics, but why it's important for the younger generation? Maybe just before we go back to Alicia, just curious.
Sure, you said it perfectly. I had so many similar experiences, both myself, again in the robotics club when I was in the 4th grade, as the only girl in a classroom full of 30 boys who didn't think that I would make it into a competition that they would definitely go to, like they were so sure that they would go to. And also, the thing that actually triggered me the most, the kind of a turning point for me was when I first got into my first coding club. And in this coding club, again, we were 20 students, and we were only 2 girls, and me and a friend of mine. And this friend of mine had to drop out of the club after 2 weeks. And this is just a school club. I mean, much less pressure than the pressure that you would feel when you would actually go into the field. And she had to drop out of this club, which she was really passionate about, and she always like spoke really excitedly about. And because she felt lonely and unwanted and out of place in a way. And I was really frustrated. For my whole life, from elementary to high school, I've always seen I've always both struggled myself and seen my friends get discouraged, hide their interests in technology, and change their majors, drop out of clubs, do all sorts of things because somehow society didn't deem this field of technology and AI as acceptable for girls. And this was just so unreasonable, because those girls had the same rights, like had the very right to be in that room, in that club, in that conference, in that class, as the rest of the school, as the rest of the boys and the rest of the class. And yeah, that was just so frustrating, and that actually kind of built the building blocks of technologies for me.
No, it's so important to bring these personal stories, because look at what the data showed in the poll. It's just that you're telling the story of why we have these drops of people's, females studying and what careers they choose. Or even take it back one step. What's the numbers of females versus males studying certain subjects or participating in certain robotics clubs, or sort of these other platforms which give you the skills, but the confidence. I mean, I think what you're saying is that, we have a reality check, and I'm very happy that you represent 2 parts of the globe. Of boys go into these places, and when you're 95% that's who it is, you feel these wings. You feel these wings that you can fly. Like that's where you belong. And yet the girls there are not necessarily feeling the same sort of possibility. And in art, it's not that girls are not there, and you are perfect examples of you're there and now you're flying. It's not as easy. It's not as expected. And maybe though, let's, because I think you guys are so inspirational, and I know we have people who joined this discussion to try to understand. So how did you just decide, I'm going to take it on? And particularly, what about the work as a technologist so interests you? And maybe Alicia, will come back to you with the mental health example. I think it's so practical of why it's so important, and everyone on the call will relate to this. And then we'll come to you, Etchem, for maybe some of that, how you find your motivation and your inspiration. So over to you, Alicia.
Yes, well, I love this. And I think that for me, what it's always been after that experience specifically, I really realized that I wanted to change, and I wanted to break the stigma and the status quo of what was already being there. And obviously it was difficult, but what I really emphasized on was it really starts from when you're young. I think I was fortunate to be able to overcome that. But I think that there's so many girls who, who are being told things like you are not capable and actually end up believing them. And I think that's why it's so important for, it's not about me being the only girl in the robotics club, but it's about getting more girls. It's about getting your friend. I think it's really a snowball effect. And for me in the mental health field, there was actually a personal story of someone who in my peer group who suicided 13 minutes after tweeting about feeling lonely. And I think as youth we're so reliant on corporations and governments to make the change we wish to see. But I think that I recognize that it was a privilege to be able to have experience in order to know things and not have knowledge in the field of AI. And if there's no point of just knowing these tools, but it's another thing to use them. And for me, that's really when I realized that I had to do something about it. And mental health to me, as I mentioned, when I think about the next crisis, the next pandemic, I really do believe it's going to be one around mental health. And so it's so important that action must be taken because the current metrics are, not really getting us anywhere. We don't treat physical health and mental health the same way. And there's just so much stigma associated. And I bet even in Turkey or Achim you live, that the stigma is still there. And I think it's so important that technology can be used as a tool. And for me in that field, I've been working and researching alongside MIT's AI lab. I reached out to them and I asked them, why don't we have more intersection, more work being done in the AI and mental health field? And I wanted to go and lead that work. So I reached out to them and I'm working there, working on diagnosing mental illness and also preventing suicide, leveraging AI tools. And I just think that the potential is honestly so amazing. And I think when you really give youth the power of using technology, and when it's not just about me, it's about how I can use my work and to influence more girls to get their hands dirty, to, be courageous in the field that they want to be in. It's not only about STEM, but it's about doing what they want to do and doing the ambitious, because there is no boundaries to what you can do. And I'd love to hear more from you, Achim, on how you were inspired to get into the AI field.
Sure, yeah. So how I actually got introduced to AI was through coding, and because I kind of grew up in a rather small town, I didn't really have many resources. And then when I started high school, I kind of started having these resources. And therefore, I always, like you, Alicia, I always grew up thinking, okay, I need to do something about this. Like there's these norms that are preventing me and my friends from getting into, like, these young women with huge potentials from getting into this field and actually exploring these endless possibilities that the field will give them. And when I started high school, I was selected as one of the 30 participants for AI for All. And then there I was kind of empowered as to, take action. And I was taught that I could actually do something about these issues that I cared about. And I was given the tools to do so. And that was just a crucial thing for me, a crucial point. And after going back to Turkey, I wanted to share these resources, these tools that I had with the community around me, and give the young girls around me, the young women in Turkey, the chance to get involved in these fields that they were passionate about. And therefore, I founded Technologies, which is an organization that promotes diversity and gender equality in the fields of AI and technology. And with Technologies, we are trying to help young women from all around Turkey, from the most remote places to the biggest cities, to pursue their interest, to pursue their passion. As you said, be courageous, to get involved and get their hands dirty. And we are organizing workshops and seminars and summits and all kinds of events to get them involved and give them this community that they can rely on. This community that will let them know that they're not alone, and that it is normal for a girl to be in the fields of technology and AI. And we are also, trying to educate them, which I think is a very crucial point about youth, that to give them the tools that they need to make the difference, the support that they need to make the difference. And yeah, so we're trying to help them with coding and all kinds of skills. And yeah, take action by youth for youth in a way, because as you all said, as both Patty and Alicia, you both said, youth is, especially the young women, are one of the most essential stakeholders in this AI conversation that are mostly overlooked. And we need to engage as the youth into this conversation, into the development of AI, into the deployment of it. And we need to help the youth get to that point, maybe. Yeah, so.
Thank you, Etchem and Alicia. I think a couple of points that you both raised that we will come back to, and I encourage folks to put your questions and answers and comments into the Q&A button at the bottom. But I really like that you guys have talked about youth, right? It's your generation. To get to, one of the points that, Aki mentioned earlier about generation equality. It's about the generation of youth, the generation of adults being on the same page for impact and gender equality. And so I love that you guys, when you're thinking about who comes together at the table to come up with a mental health solution using AI, or any other solution you're looking at with, in thousands of ways it can be applied. You're not just thinking only having girls at the table. You're trying to take the impact of your generation. But the second thing I really love is that you also realize that in order to have that table be the most impactful, you need more girls at the table, because you've seen your friends' personal sort of challenges, your personal challenges. And what I love about what both of you have done is you're not just sitting at that table. You've set up platforms and communities to facilitate systematically more girls being at that table with your generation. And I think that's just really thoughtful, and it's the kind of change we need to see on a massive scale to be the most impactful as the AI community. And maybe what I'm going to do right now, and we'll come back to you everyone in a minute, but I'm going to shift to Caitlin and ask Caitlin, really practically, Caitlin, what are the concrete and collective changes we need to do as a community? I mean, on this call, there are stakeholders of all flavors, right, who equal the AI community. And from your perspective, maybe tell us a little bit about what perspective you're coming from. We have the A+ Alliance in your back screen, but maybe not everybody knows what that is. But also, you're very good at just being direct and mobilizing people for change. So just love to have some of your thoughts on what are the top things you'd love people to walk away from this panel discussion, knowing they can do to be part of the change.
Fabulous. Thanks, Patty. Thanks for having me, and thank you. It's so wonderful to be on this panel with these extraordinary young women and leaders. So Women at the Table, which is a co-founder of the A+ Alliance, works on feminist systems change in technology and sustainability, in the economy, democratic governance, using technology and innovation and AI as the prism for that change. And the A+ Alliance is a group of activists and academics who work on inclusive algorithms. So just for 1 minute, I do want to go back to the fact that AI, which we know is based on algorithms. Algorithms are just equations. They can be on a regular spreadsheet. They can be on a piece of legal paper. There's just, it's just math. They're about allocation, and they use data. And this data that is used it's very strange, because the data that we have is basically default male data. The data that we've collected, mostly from the North, mostly from white guys, and guys, all the way through. And so what that means is then when the machines take the data and they learn from the data, they actually pattern the invisibility of the girls and the women and the other historically marginalized communities that haven't been counted and put into this data system. And this invisibility becomes permanent. It almost becomes wired into the system. And it happens at scale because this invisibility, it then is the machines see exactly what feminist analysis might tell you has been happening for the last 100, 200 years. They see, where are the women, where are the poor, where are they, where are the marginalized communities that have been left out of the power systems? And the machines actually make it the rule. So that's, so we have to keep that in mind about why bias and discrimination in machine learning, in AI, is an urgent problem. That's an immediate problem. It's not up to, it will be solved by the young women that we have amongst us, but we cannot, it's like saying the climate crisis is going to be solved by Greta Thunberg and a bunch of other teenagers. This is something that we all need to be doing together to help leave a system that's been changed and is healthy and actually leverages technology for all the good that it can do. Also, this is not something like, oh, maybe it could be a problem. We're doing, just to say, tomorrow and the day after at a university in Switzerland, at ETH Zurich, a Femtech conference. And one of the presenters, looking at her slides today, the COVID studies for the vaccines that we've just all had do not have sex disaggregated data. So we also see that women were the people that actually had the reactions to the vaccines, but we also know it shouldn't be a surprise in 2021 because nobody ever actually studied the effects of the women separately. So we also have to keep that in mind. So it's not, this is not something that might happen in the future. It's been happening a long time. It's continuing to happen now, and now we have to change it. So what do? We have a couple of things that we can do. Yep.
And I think that's a really good point, Caitlin. I just want to re-emphasize what you're saying. The AI application is something, it's been happening with, forget AI for a minute, it's been happening over and over and over again, because one of the foundational issues is that evidence-based decisions, whatever that's the algorithms that are developed with AI, or it's government officials sitting at the table to say we're going to do X, Y, and Z in policy, or community members coming together to say they're going to do this. If the data don't have the right perspective of everybody and includes everybody, the decision making that comes out of it, albeit plopping into an algorithm that AI or what government officials are looking at, will not be as impactful. And so it isn't only who's at the table, it's what they're at the table with. And I think that's a really good point that you're making, because it's not, again, to Alicia and Etcham's point, it's about how then that whoever's at the table in their collective has the tools to then be impactful. So yeah, then I wanted to say that because I think sometimes people don't realize that AI is just a replication of sort of a lot of the biases that have been in any other types of approaches. But most importantly, with AI, it becomes much more structural and scalable. And that's sort of it's sort of like overwhelming to me to think the impact it could have.
It's exponential. I want to add something that what I think everybody was alluding to, but I also want to make it explicit here. It's about who's at the table. I think it is very, very technologists that we have in my world, feminist technologists, men and women who care about equality and fairness for all. However, need to be a technologist. We need to open up the tables to women and girls who I think are like the underutilized intellectual resource in our world, to sit at the table and understand, explain their problems. They have problem definitions. They have solutions. They may not be able to write the code yet, or may never want to write the code, but they need to be included in the whole decision-making process, which still in AI has also suffered from being mostly technological. and technical and not multidisciplinary enough. We need social scientists, we need economists, we need social workers, we need school teachers, we need people that understand the lived realities of our world together with the people that can do the technology, solving, making problems. So that would be my first. You said 3 things. I do have 3 things. One is process, that we need to change the process. We need to open it up so the problem definitions can really be from the girls in the most rural place who haven't had the benefits yet in their high school to learn the technology, to actually really explain what's going on so that we can then co-create the technology, the AI that may help them. So that's one thing. And one way we can do that structurally is to say, companies, would you report on the balance in your process for design? How are you designing things? Who are you asking? Who's part of the entire process of budgeting, of auditing? There's an entire ecosystem of AI that the code is just a part of. It's not the entire part of. So that's one thing. So we can ask people to report on the balance and composition of their groups. Second thing is, very similar to that, to use as a lever for change procurement. If they're policymakers here, if they're private sector people here, if they're public sector people here, you can use your procurement systems, I think, to jumpstart an entire economy of AI so that you can give to Alicia's mental health group. You can say, we want to be able to give to a certain number of brilliant young women the funds to start something, and that if you have set-asides to say, we want to privilege innovation and technology, there we can get the voice of youth, there we can get the voice of people who haven't been at the table. And the last thing is to use policy also to help accomplish that, so that we encourage, when we talk about innovation a lot, it's sort of been hijacked, like don't stifle innovation, like that it has to be only private sector, only has to be pizza apps, right? But it also, this is innovation. We have an incredible field of people. And I think that we should also have public policies that help bring in people like Eshem and Alicia, Hoda, the entire ecosystem, and that we can use all those levers to accomplish that. Those are my 3 things.
Wow. All right. And I see that Hoda's agreeing to all of them in the chat function too. And we're going to get to Q&A in a minute, but I'm going to ask that Hoda and Echem and Alicia, if you can open up your videos as well, because I think, let's build on some of these points. I'm just scribbling furiously on my notebook. And I think you're just relating so well, Caitlin, to this audience, that who is the AI community? Who is the world? It's not just the technologist. It's how does the whole process be more inclusive and diverse? And I don't think this is unique. This is. I come from a world of government officials coming together, right, to make policies and laws and etc. And it's who do they open it up to know then what they should be shaping. And I think you're bringing it. It is important that the technologists are diverse and inclusive and include all of the Alicias and Echems and all their friends of the world as the pipeline of who's going to be or who will be in those professional roles. But it's also just, how do we open up the process to be respectful of who knows and valued of who knows, because in the end, those 2 things are really important to make the actual algorithm and solution better. But I want to open it up, Hoda, because you came in and I always appreciate when somebody puts in a chat like, you go, Caitlin, that's right on. What really resonated with you of what she said is like that one thing that you would love to see change in, say, 5 years, and you would know, like, we are making a difference.
So, Patty, thank you so much for bringing, and Caitlin, such a fresh perspective to the table. I think this 360 view of building a technology, regardless if it's AI oriented or not,
is very important. Because again, we cannot just be 2% of a human sitting at the table and trying to build the world's solution. It's unheard of and it's not acceptable. If it's something that happened in the past, we are dealing today, as you have said, Patty, with generational issues that existed because of that. And it's time for us to change the narrative and to make sure that when we are building, for example, personally, when I'm building my team around cybersecurity technology, I am involving the social scientists. I'm involving the person who's coming from the biotech industry, or they're coming from a health perspective. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to just deliver a functionality. Yes, we want to deliver a technology that provides a functionality. We want to provide a technology that provide an impact for a human being, or for a human soul, or for the welfare of a human being. And we don't want to deal with another a well-being pandemic, as Alicia said, because definitely the 360 view is something that we should advocate for in the table, and we should, in our own realms, try to empower the fact that a kid could take actually a grant to establish a company and have the ownership of that company, and then deliver on a product. And they do have the power of attorney to execute, and the power of attorney to innovate, and also to bring in something to the table. And if we can, because if we keep on talking of regulation and the lack of regulation and the lack of policy, we'll be stuck at that methodological kind of a state of discussion. And to break away from it, we need to have a system that would not condone an unholistic AI that has not been built by a diverse development team should be a questionable AI, should be a questionable technology. If you don't have that kind of a stamp that tells you the team that developed this AI comes from a diverse background and comes from a diverse perspective, and provide that level of transparency to the end user, we shouldn't use that AI, because tomorrow's technology is centered around the transparency and centers around a very, very knowledgeable user, a user who will drive how this technology is being built. In the past, we used to just be receivers and consumers. Today, no, actually the user is advocating for an unbiased AI, an ethical AI, and just an equivalence of providing an impact with this AI. I just don't want to use something that I bought from a marketplace that does not provide to, for example, solving a problem around the world. If I can put my purchases towards solving, an SDG problem, or solving an issue of inequality around the world, then users will go towards that kind of impact investing, and indirect impact investing that is happening around the world. So I am again joining my voice to advocate for this with Caitlin. And I think going forward, people who are part of this great summit today, I think we should as well advocate for that, and we should hold each other liable towards providing for this kind of holistic view, building the technology. Thank you so much. Thank you, Patty.
Yeah. How do you mean? You bring up some really good points, and I want to get to a question that's come in the Q&A from Miguel, and it sort of lands on what Caitlin sort of began the conversation around procurement. Hoda, you talked about some sort of grant funding, and now this whole other approach of indirect investing as consumers, right? And I think it's, how do we get to a point that there's a standard that good AI is diverse, and how do we then have that be the consumable demand? But I want to get to Miguel's question, which is really, in order to get to that point where it can be the consumable demand, we need the things that actually represent this diversity. And any of you jump in with sort of a response to his question of, where's the direct investing potential right now for some of these promising examples of diverse AI? And maybe I'll start with you, Caitlin, because you kickstarted the conversation, but then Alicia, Etchem, Hoda also jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say what a great question. I think that we need to teach about AI and science differently. So it not as something separate. It's very multidisciplinary. It's very interdisciplinary. It's holistic. And what a colleague actually from Finland, I heard in remarks recently, had said that there's some studies done there. There is great interest in environmental engineering by young women, as opposed to traditional civil engineering, mechanical engineering, which are generally places where women just don't go for a variety of reasons. Maybe because it's new, it's not so ossified, but I think it's the reason why you have so many young women studying medicine. It's probably because it has purpose. It probably because it's technology that people can understand, has a connection, it's going to help people. I see that, Alicia with this and SM nodding. It's about connecting with people, and it's not about, it's not necessarily about video game programming. Maybe it is, but it's about helping people. And I think that if we educate in that way and say that's what technology can do, it can be AI for good, just to go back to our name of our panel, I think that might change things. What do you think, guys?
Yes.
Go ahead, Alicia. We'll let you kickstart us.
I love what you mentioned, Caitlin, especially in terms of purpose, because I think it's so true. I think maybe not as girls, but I think people in general, we want to do things that has purpose. And I think in fields, as you mentioned, with being a lawyer and going into medicine, purpose is showed. And I think in our education system, it's so important that we do educate and talk about topics like AI, because honestly, I don't learn about these things in school. I'm not sure about you, Etchem, but these are just things that are not learned. And in clubs, there already is a huge diversity gap of even girls joining clubs and coding clubs and robotics clubs. So it is just so difficult. And I think it's really about showing people why they should care and, why it's important, the impact it has. And I think once people start realizing, and once we find outlets like our education system to share that with younger generations, that's when more people will see the potential and want to join those fields. But yeah, I'm curious to hear more of your thoughts, Etchem and Hoda.
Yeah. I echo the same kind of response. Thank you, Alicia. It's about the purpose. And again, we cycle back to impact. And with that, you see right now, thanks, Miguel, for bringing the question on the table, a lot of funds, they go for impact investing. And when I talk about impact investing, it goes beyond that kind of social responsible investing, but they want to make sure that they invest in women-led startups and women-led AI startups around the globe. And these, to tell you the truth, most of these funds are also being administrated by women at some sort, but it's good to see this change, and it's good to see such a shift. And it's good for us also to work with these entrepreneurs. In UAE, for example, most of the entrepreneurs that I'm working with in the landscape of AI, I would tell you 70% of them, they came from a woman founder. And it's great to see that on the ground, and it's great to motivate them to keep on doing more and keep on achieving more.
Yeah, thanks, Hoda. And we'll come back to that hopefully. And I really encourage all of you to put your questions in the Q&A, because this is our time, our few minutes we have together, and it's so great to get these questions like Miguel put out, because it really triggers a lot of thinking. And Hoda, to your point, I mean, just like it's not about only the female technologists at the table, we can't only just look at the sort of female entrepreneur in the impact investing space. And it's how do we make the impact investing space value this, to your earlier point, that no, I'm not going to put my money to anything that's not this standard of good. And how do we as a community impact that? But I want to come back to what Caitlin was saying about the reframing of the education, space around this. Because I also, coming from UNICEF, sometimes I just get totally confused of what is a good place to focus on to make sure that girls and boys equitably are getting these right skills, these right motivations, these right sort of paths of purpose. And Alicia, your point that you're not finding this in your classroom, and you're not necessarily finding it in the clubs themselves, and that you're finding it sort of separate. I'm curious, Ecem, are you also seeing the same thing in Turkey of like, you see even at your age point, like, what you want to achieve, that AI is a big part of achieving that for the scale you want to achieve it, but the two things are not linked in like a, here's what I'm learning, here's what my education sort of program is. Curious of your thoughts on that, Ecem.
Exactly. Yeah, I completely agree. Our education does not include anything on what AI is and what it could be and what it needs to be, actually. And I think that I think that it is important for us to maybe in a third party way educate these young women and give them this lifeline that they can use to learn more about coding. I mean, it sure is a great point that it should be included in our education, but the thing is we don't see role models either. Like we in our daily lives we don't talk about female computer scientists, and I think that these should be maybe more brought up in conversations such as these, and maybe in media these should be more celebrated. And yeah, but I feel totally the same way. I mean, we do not learn about these things at school, and we do not learn about them and outside of school either. So there's this lack of knowledge, lack of role models, lack of opportunities to get involved, and lack of many things.
Thanks, Ecem. I think that's really helpful, and how, right now we have an education system that basically says, okay, young person, go on this track if you want to have purpose, right? You want to be impactful in mental health, or you want to make a difference in the world of education. And then if you want to kind of study tech and AI, go over here. And the truth is, it's the need to find they're one and the same. They're one and the same. And that we need that sort of articulation and to actually make the biggest impact. And so I think a very good point that we've made here is in the pipeline of learning and education, how do we not have how do we bring these two worlds together more? And I love the concrete points you made, Caitlin, about like, environmental engineering. I mean, it's like you have the purpose set, you have the multiple tools in your toolkit, AI being one of them, to make the difference for that purpose. I think it's the same thing in the work world that we can also talk about. But we do have a question that came in the chat function, and I want to make sure we talk about it because it's come up a little bit in our panel discussion, and that's, it can sometimes be a hostile environment, whether you're in the education learning part of it or in the workforce in the AI community. And how do we make the sort of ecosystem accountable for being less hostile, right? I mean, why should it be that Alicia has to go home after she's been told she shouldn't be there and do all this processing herself to then, put up her shoulders and go back in? Like, what can we do systematically to make either the education and learning environment or the workforce less hostile for women or girls to be part of? Just would love any panelists' thought on that.
I think so, a lot of it's structural, a lot of it's human resources. I mean, the reason why I suggested that there be proactive disclosure of the balance and composition of one's design teams, right? Not only women, not only girls, but just what is that composition, would mean that people would have to start hiring and then retaining those people. And eventually people would have to be kinder because you would be rewarded for having women who are happy on your teams. I mean, I think that that's one structural way to address that, because you can't just say, you know, it's all about micro. I know it's a really, really tough problem, but it's also the corporate problem about why, which there's a tremendous amount of research on, right? Which is that, you know, having to work 12 hours a day is not very friendly to having any care duties, having any work-life balance. And I think that corporately you need to also probably change that. But it's probably easier to say, we're just going to put a seal of approval on teams that are well composed and see how maybe the market would shift. That's an idea.
Thanks, Caitlin. I like that sort of structural accountability and who's responsible for it, right? It's like an HR of a company that has to bring this inclusive teams. Alicia, did you want to come in?
I really love what you mentioned, Caitlin. I think that I'd like to take more of a, because I love how you mentioned about the corporate side, but I think even from the educational standpoint, two things that come to my mind are, the first is that educators have a role to play. And I think that's something that most educators forget. You know, they think that they go into their 9-to-5 job, just a teacher, and that's it. But I think that the role, the influence educators have is just huge. You know, they are the enablers for change, and they're the enablers for allowing all youth to really explore their potential. And I think it's so important to understand that, and especially if there are any educators, or if you know any educators, but to also really foster skills. I think that one thing that's been really important to me, you know, as we're growing in the 21st century, it's not about being so technically skilled. And obviously it's important to, you know, be technically skilled, but I think it's just, you know, there's so many people, you know, we have AI doing the work we need, but what we need more is people. We need more humans, and we need more humans leading these changes, because that's what really sets us apart from, you know, just a machine to an actual human. And I think even in our educational system, we need more, you know, mindset, and we need more soft skill thinking. And I think it's, you know, I want to move away from using soft skills, more of human skills. And I think two things that really come to my mind are really showing youth that they're about being unconventional thinkers. We can have options like being an environmental engineer, but we can also show youth that they're, you know, they can find so much intersection with they're passionate about as well. They can leverage these tools like technology and see areas where they think that, and where they believe that, and where they're passionate about, where they believe that change should be made, like I am with mental health. And I think it's so important to, you know, foster the unconventional thinking mindset, and also showing youth that it's okay to embrace failure. I think in our school system, that's something we do such a bad job at. You know, we get a bad mark. Okay, now we're not going to go to university. We get a bad mark. Okay, now we're not going to be successful. But I think even as educators, as I was mentioning, it's so important to tell educators to show their students that failure is just equally as important as success and is needed. And I think, you know, now it's important to teach kids how to code, but it's also important to teach kids how to be human as well.
Thanks, Alicia. And we had a great, you know, question that came in from Paula around sort of echoing some of these points you just raised and Caitlin made about we need different modalities of education systems, right? And sort of who's accountable, again, like you're saying, to the teachers or the education system in general to bring forth this diversity. And I want to give Etchem, I want to give you a moment to come in also, because I'm sure you have some thoughts, and particularly looking at, you know, because this discussion was really trying to say, what in the education system of young people today do we need to be doing differently? Because it really worries me when I look, you know, again, sitting at UNICEF, and my world is like 18 and younger. But I also come from a world that's a lot of this sort of 18 and older. And about when I look at this topic, I'm just concerned that this pipeline of is not going to be ready to bring what we're talking about here. And I'm just curious, Achim, in your experience in Turkey, do you have any thoughts sort of to Paula's question around what the education system could be doing better? Or just the environment in which we live and how how it's shown that in what we see in movies or TV, or that we begin to break some of these. I like what Alicia you said. It's not mystical. AI is not mystical. Somehow it's become like some mystical thing that's out there that only some people who have like technologist in their title can know about and use. It's just another tool. It's just another tool to make impact in the world, and we need it to be a certain quality. And but it's not necessarily there yet, Etchem. So, what do you think? Just as maybe some last words from your side. Just hope. Yeah.
Of course, I think our education systems should foster the youth to speak up and be more active about the issues that we see, and to, basically be critical thinkers in a way. I mean, most of the education systems say that they do this, but I believe we mostly just read stuff and write stuff. And the thing is, with AI, I think that our curricula should definitely include some section of how AI could impact our world, some sort of basic knowledge that maybe all of the students could grow up knowing. But other than that, I think that growing up as critical thinkers and as student activists in a way is very important for our world today. And yeah, I think education should be liberating in that sense. It should be empowering us, not teasing us because we speak up, not punishing us because we think outside of the box. But it should push us to think outside of the box in order to adapt to these new technologies that we are talking about, in order to accept them and use them as tools in a more creative way. So
I think that's really well said, Etchem. And to Alicia, your point. My gosh, can we stop talking about critical thinking as being a soft skill? I mean, come on. If critical thinking is not the core of what all this is and should be the highest thing that's valued in every individual, and again, that then AI is a tool to achieve amongst many other sort of pathways. I think you guys have raised so many important points here today. I wish we had another 3 hours to go into each of these topics of, the education system change that's needed, the workforce system change that needed, to Hoda's points, the world of finance system change that are needed. But I walk away just really hopeful that we had this conversation and all these things came up. That we didn't just have a conversation of if we just had more girls in STEM clubs, then the world's going to be better when it comes to AI for change, because it's not that simple. It's not that simple. We have to understand the processes that are the systems of AI and make shifts there, as well as making sure that we have the diversity of people at the table in the various roles they need to be in. But at the bottom of it all, we need the people who want to make change, right, and get excited about that. And all four of you have just been so exciting to hear from, and really, I want to thank you very much for bringing that passion and inspiration and practicality. I think we're very practical what we can offer now from this panel to all the different stakeholders who came together. And what I'd like to do now is bring in another fantastic youth voice, Belen, who's going to sort of maybe give her perspectives as well. having listened to this amazing panel, Belen, but you're just such an inspiration yourself. So over to you to give us some final closing words before you pass it on to Pritam.
Yeah, thank you. It's been amazing to listen to your insights from a wide variety of voices here. I believe that itself adds so much value, and it's a bit of what it's all about: diversity and action, and considering different points of view for the construction of these AI systems. I was also the only girl in the robotics team at high school and workshops, but then when we co-founded, when we started with the STEM Academy, where we founded and supported this type of communities, we started to see that the more women the girls saw leading, for example, the more empowered they felt to join. And our breaking point was when the captain of the different team was a girl. Then there was no turning back. And the more girls were involved, and once we had equality, everything was better, including our results in competitions, and the participation rate between girls and boys was smooth over time. So yeah, action towards equality in this field needs to be intentionally made, and it needs to be ambitious. We need to be able to tackle the unequal gap to avoid the impact gap, as Jora said. And I want to mention that I live in Chile. And for example, Latin America is the most violent region in the world, and one of the most unequal. It's wealthier than others relatively, but unequal. And Chile tops some of the ranks, being one of the most developed among the region, but also profoundly unequal. It's so unequal that the country was all over the news at the end of 2019, when brutal, deadly protests were carried. And now we're in the middle of rewriting our constitution. We're the first country on earth that will have its constitution written on parity criteria, around 50% of women and 50% of men elected. And that gives us so much hope, because we know that inequality historically and today still has the face of women and young girls, with the lowest digital literacy rates, digital gaps, participation in STEM fields, and so on. The so-called gender digital divide. But I deeply believe that if we do AI right, we can change that instead of deepening it. And every time I participate in committees with PhD experts in AI, discussing the scope and possible futures, I end up with both excitement, but also a profound feeling of fear and anxiety. And I shouldn't feel that. I should feel hope. I just graduated from online university and going through a pandemic in my early 20s. I should feel hope for the future, not being scared or having this feeling of fear. And I'm part of the privilege that knows a bit of how it works and what it could eventually do. But most girls and young women, they don't. And I'm not even mentioning that still, almost all of the people that I relate to in this field are still the big majority men. I also fear that we are still putting what some experts call to be something larger than all of human tech revolutions added together, all of them combined, to be made highly by men, 50% of the population, hoping that's going to solve 100% of the gender, race, sexually diverse problems of the world's population and challenges. So are you going to contribute to deepen the inequality and violence in this region I live in and the world? Biases, discrimination, different concerns, you name it. That please don't. We want to see hope, real hope and action. I think that's the most important, and I think that what was discussed here today gives us a good idea of the path to follow. So thank you, and make sure to stay with us a bit longer. Now, Pritam will close this amazing session.
Thanks, Belen, and thank you very much, Patty, for moderating this inspiring session, and to the panelists for putting forth ideas and concrete solutions. It'll go a long way towards closing a digital gender gap in AI. So we'll be opening up a quick poll with one question. Please do answer and let us know how much you like this session. Meanwhile, let me give you an indication of some of the work that ITU does. At ITU, we are very pleased to host this session since Closing the gender divide is a major commitment of the ITU, and we are doing it through the Equals partnership, the global partnership to bridge the digital gender divide. As part of our work under the Skills Coalition of Equals, we've launched with UNESCO and GIZ a publication titled "I'd Blush If I Could," Closing Gender Divide and Digital Skills Through Education. It provides a rationale for interventions and recommendations, in particular for policymakers to help women and girls develop strong digital skills through education. However, it's clear we still have a long way to go to reduce the gap in digital skills. And what we heard today, it's just the beginning. We heard how AI solutions can offer opportunities and promising practices for increasing digital skills, for girls. But we also heard how, in particular, the emergence of AI, it brings forth issues related to children's safety. AI systems may present risks in terms of privacy and unwanted contact, and therefore not only need to be safe by design, resilient against hacking and cyber attacks, but also the challenges need to be addressed through robust policies and regulations. And these need to be fully integrated into policies relevant for children's rights that offer a framework for all risks and potential harms for children in the digital environment. And you can find guidance in this regard in the guidelines for child online protection that ITU, UNICEF, and other partners released last year. And finally, let me also encourage you to check out the AI for Good program online to see more sessions that may be of interest to you. For example, tomorrow, Wednesday, the 26th, at 4 o'clock Geneva time, we have a seminar on AI and health titled "Seeing the Future AI-Based Risk Assessment Models" by Regina Brazile, Professor of Computer Science at MIT. The day after tomorrow, Thursday, 27th at 3 o'clock Geneva time, we have a seminar on trustworthy AI, explainable AI and trust. This is part of our AI and trust series. You can find links to the events page and more info, in the chat. With that, we've reached the end of this webinar and would again like to thank everyone involved, our panel, our participants, our partners, sponsors, and our co-convener, Switzerland. Thank you very much and hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Selector, rewind selector, rewind selector, rewind selector, rewind selector, rewind selector.